Welcome to the Physician Associate Podcast.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Physician Associate Podcast. My name is James. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by a very special guest, Donya Mighty. Welcome to the show, Donya.
Thank you. So my name's Donya. I'm a physician associate. I've been qualified since 2018 and I started studying medicine in 2020. So I'm currently in my third year of graduate entry medicine at the University of Warwick.
Perfect, thank you. I thought it'd be really interesting and useful for physician associates and other PA students, people who might be listening to this podcast, to find out a bit more about that conversion from becoming a PA and then training to be a doctor and what that's been like for you. So thank you for coming on the show.
No problem.
Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about you and your life before you were a physician associate?
Yeah, so before doing PA, I did an undergraduate degree in human biology. I'm a mum, so I had one of my children before I started studying the PA course. So my daughter, she's 10, almost 11 now, and I've had subsequently two children, one whilst studying medicine as well.
Okay, wow. So that sounds quite intense. Good on you.
Thanks.
How have you found that experience?
Yeah, I think I've definitely got academic fatigue at this point, after having done, my 3 years of undergrad, 2 years of PA, and now doing medicine. So I'm really looking forward to the end. I think it has had its challenges, mainly, trying to juggle everything, home life, studies, trying to kind of, still have a bit of time for myself and things that I enjoy as well. So it has been challenging, but I think having already studied sort of with having a child previously, I've found it a little bit easier to adapt perhaps than maybe some other people would.
Yeah, bless you. I mean, the PA course is intense enough, isn't it, without having all the other responsibilities. Where did you do your PA training? What was that experience like?
So I studied at the University of West of England in Bristol. I was part of the first cohort of physician associates to train there. There were lots of teething problems. I think that's probably fair to say, it being the first cohort. That being said, it wasn't a bad experience. I can look back at it now and think that actually it was, a good time that I had there. So yeah, it was a great experience.
Brilliant. And then tell me about what happened when you qualified as a physician associate. What sort of jobs, what specialities did you work in?
So my first job was within trauma and orthopedics, although it was more of a medical role. So it was mainly orthogeriatrics, working with patients who had neck femur fractures. It was a good learning experience of like hospital ward-based medicine. Also, it was within a department that was already familiar with physician associates. So that it was nice actually being within a place that already had PAs, was already aware of the role. So I did feel quite supported in that sense. And then after working there for a little while, I transitioned into GP. I've spent a while, actually, pretty much the vast majority of my time as a PA has been within GP. And that's good as well in the sense that I feel like it's very different to hospital medicine. There's a lot more autonomy I've found in terms of like decision making. And it's enabled me to then locum as a PA, because there's obviously not so many avenues for PAs to locum at the moment, but it's allowed me to fund myself through my medical studies as well.
Yes, interesting. I was going to ask about finances and how that works in terms of studying. What point did you decide you wanted to become a doctor? Was that something that you knew as a child, and had you applied to medical school during, sixth form and A-levels, or was it as you became a PA, did something happen to make you decide?
I think it was definitely later on in life. So my mum always used to say to me when I was younger that she wanted me to become a doctor. And I think perhaps maybe because my mum had suggested it, I didn't want to be a doctor at that point. And I didn't think that I liked science actually when I was in school. So I've had a very roundabout route to where I am now. So when I started my undergraduate degree initially, I started studying psychology, and I took biology as one of my electives within the first year. And then I decided actually I preferred the biology. So I switched to a human biology degree. And then I got towards the end of my undergrad and sort of didn't really know what I was going to do afterwards. And I'd had a job within healthcare. I used to work as a dispatcher for the out of hours. But obviously it was a non-clinical role, but I really enjoyed it and I enjoyed working within that environment. And I'd always wanted to do a job where I was, it sounds cliche, but to help people. So it was either going to be, working in healthcare, or I was considering teaching, or, all different jobs that essentially public sector. And then I started looking into what I could do after I finished my degree. And I didn't really want to relocate at that point. So I wanted to stay sort of, within the Bristol area. And I applied to a few different courses, had a look at some open days. I was offered places on various different healthcare courses, and something just kind of didn't feel right about all of those. And I thought, it sounds good on the face of it. I'm not sure if I'm going to like this job in the longer term. And I did think about medicine very fleetingly, but the idea sort of went out of my head pretty much as soon as it had come in, because I hadn't entered university through a traditional route. So I didn't do A-levels, I did an access course, and I knew that would, almost certainly mean that I couldn't study medicine as an undergraduate, because, it's very much based on sort of the academics and A-levels. So I kind of just forgot about medicine. But then my mum, who was living abroad at this point, was living in North America, where they obviously do have a lot of physician associates, had told me about the physician associate role. And then I stumbled across the course being offered at my local university, which wasn't very far away from me. And I thought, oh, this actually sounds really perfect, because I'm going to be able to do sort of, a similar-ish role. And I'm also going to, be able to have a stable income. PA's obviously starting on a nicer starting salary than some other sort of healthcare roles. And it would enable me to, have time at home and be able to do other things that I wanted to do alongside, because it seemed like there wasn't going to be much on call or nights commitment, that sort of thing. So I applied for the course and I got into PA, but I'm not sure if I fully appreciated what the role of a PA was going to be at that point. I think if I had known that, and this is probably going to sound controversial, but had I known just the amount of work that is sort of required of a PA, and actually how similar the day-to-day role is to our junior doctor colleagues, albeit not prescribing and doing additional things, I probably would have rethought again about how could I get into medicine had I known that. So whilst I was on the PA course, I very much enjoyed it, and I knew that pursuing a career in medicine was definitely what I wanted to do. And in my second year of the PA course, that's when I started to then explore options of going into medicine. But it was only after there was a student who'd started on the PA course with me at the same time and received an offer to study medicine at the University of Warwick whilst we were on the course, I think within our first year. And I think that's what then made me start looking at the University of Warwick, because I'd heard of somebody getting in there, and I thought, oh, okay, let me just have a look at what their entry requirements are. And largely I met all of the entry requirements, and they don't look at A-levels. And I thought, well, this is absolutely great, because as a graduate, I've got a degree already. They're not going to care about what I did before. So yeah, I started thinking about it more seriously sort of towards the end of the PA course.
If you could put your finger on what the difference is and what attracted you from going to PA to doctor training, how would you describe that?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I think there's a few things. It's not just one. I think it's very much like multifactorial for me anyway. So I guess one quick thing that I can mention is progression. And I think, we all know that as physician associates, things are sort of perhaps a bit halted at the moment because of regulation, not knowing necessarily what the role is going to look like in the future. So that's one big thing that was there, sort of the uncertainty, particularly at the time that I was studying. Within my final year, that's when it was announced that the GMC would sort of take on physician associates. But in my mind, I knew that it would be a long time before that happened. Things get in the way, and we've had Brexit, we've had COVID, and we're sort of still not there yet. So I kind of just thought at that point, I might as well just go and pursue medicine in that time, and perhaps regulation and prescribing may not have actually even come in and I know that sounds very pessimistic, but that was sort of my view on it. And a lot of my PA colleagues I'd spoken to at that time were like, oh no, like they've said it's going to come in within the next 2 years. And I think optimistically, like we all would have loved that to have happened. But I just kind of foresaw that was not going to be the case. I think these things do unfortunately take a long time. So progression and regulation, that was a big thing. I think for me personally, though, the biggest factor was that my parents live abroad. They live in North America. And at some point, especially as they get older, I do want to be able to move there so I can live and work there. And currently, as it stands, PAs, obviously, as you know, cannot work as PAs in North America and many other places around the world as well. So that was, I guess, the biggest driving force for me to go and pursue medicine, is so that at least my qualifications could be recognised elsewhere.
That makes sense. That's interesting. That all of those factors, of course, people have lives and other things going on away from education, isn't it? And there's lots of other factors that can determine which profession you want to choose. To my knowledge, and don't take this as gospel, but New Zealand is the only other country where UK trained PAs are being recruited.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Have you managed to work as a physician associate and do your studying?
Yeah, so in the first year of the course, I worked 1 day a week in GP alongside the course. And I did that for part of the second year, actually. No, all of the second year of the course. I got confused then because I was on maternity leave for some of it. But yes, no, I worked during first and second year of the course, 1 day a week in GP. After my second year of the course, I've decided to leave my GP job because as I'm sort of going further into the course, so the requirement in terms of being on placement is obviously a lot more now. So I'm now locuming out of hours, primarily on Sundays. I'm doing telephone triage in like urgent care.
There are a few routes, aren't there, to going into becoming a doctor? So like you said, it's either the traditional undergraduate medical training after A-levels. There is the graduate entry option, which is a sort of condensed version of that course, isn't it, into sort of 4 years for people with a degree. And increasingly, there is the workup of the doctor's apprenticeship. And I'm hoping to do another episode of the podcast to talk to somebody about the doctor's apprenticeship route, where you'll get paid to train, learn and earn at the same time.
Yeah, I've heard about that relatively recently. But yeah, the doctor's apprenticeship, I'm not sure how I feel about it. I think definitely like mixed views on it. I think in some senses it's great because it's opening doors to people who, you know, the finances may have been sort of hindrance before. So in terms of widening participation, I think it's great. From another perspective, I do just wonder whether this is just a bit of getting cheap service provision for the NHS kind of at the same time as well. So I would hope, and I know that, you know, things how they work on wards and in hospitals, it's sort of very much dependent on how busy things are. So I would hope that that route doesn't take away from people's learning experiences just because they're having to sort of staff understaffed wards.
Good point, well made on that one. Yes, I have the same concern. And of course, there is the physician associate apprenticeship model that's coming in as well. And there's an episode of the PA podcast if people want to find out more about physician associate apprenticeships. Let's talk about funding, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
The graduate entry option must be quite expensive. And if you've already done a master's study PA course, what options are available to you in terms of student finance and support?
So as a graduate, it works out better to do a graduate course than to do an undergraduate medicine course, because for the undergraduate medicine course, I may be wrong on this, but I believe that you don't get funding towards tuition. I think you only get funding towards a maintenance loan if you're doing an undergraduate medicine degree as a graduate. In terms of the graduate entry medicine course, for the first year of the course, you pay the first £3,500 yourself of tuition fees, and the remainder of the tuition fees are covered by student finance. You also get a maintenance loan on top. In terms of years 2 to 4 of the course, it's funded through a combination of the NHS bursary and student finance. So they cover all of the tuition fees, and you also get an NHS bursary on top, which is means tested. There's also like a non-means tested element in there as well. And you apply for then the lower amount of the student finance loan, so the non-means tested element, which I think is about £2,500 approximately. So it is difficult, I think, especially in the current climate of, you know, cost of living crisis. And I think the vast majority of people that I know either get supplementary income through sort of parental support or through working part-time jobs.
In one of your earlier answers, you said physician associates are relatively well paid as an entry into the profession. And when you compare PA starting salary to an F1 doctor's starting salary, which is often done on Twitter and social media and the cause of quite a few arguments, does that give you pause for thought in terms of the pay cut that you'll be taking from being a PA?
Oh yeah, I mean, it definitely does. I hope that full pay restoration happens by the time I get there. I think going into medicine, I obviously knew I would be taking a pay cut. So I was fully aware of the fact that for the first few years, at least, it wouldn't be the same as what my PA salary was. And that made the decision actually, all the more harder. Real life things obviously do come into it, and finances is, such an important thing. But that being said, I am considering going less than full time through F1 and F2 and supplementing alongside locuming as a PA, which I know that a lot of people will listen to this and think, oh my gosh, but actually, we all have lives to live, and I've got children and I need to, support my family at the end of the day. And it's really unfortunate that F1s and F2s do not get paid as much as they should for the job that they're doing. And I, wholly agree with a lot of the things that are said about doctors' salaries in comparison to other healthcare professionals. I mean, obviously, I don't agree with it becoming a divisive debate, but I think it's a fair point to say that actually for what you're doing, the role that you're providing, that you should be paid fairly for that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Donya. I'm really interested, perhaps I'm making an assumption here that if you have a level of knowledge from PA school and working as a PA, that you probably just are breezing through the curriculum of a graduate entry medicine program. Is that true? Are you finding that your prior experience is really useful, or are the two courses very similar in terms of the education of a PA student and a medical student?
I would say absolutely not. It is really not the same. It has been such a learning curve, especially the preclinical medicine, which, many people argue that it's not necessary in terms of like clinical day-to-day medicine when you're looking after patients. But actually, I think obviously it gives you, a greater grounding in what's happening, the pathology that's going on with your patient. So it's definitely not the same. For me as a PA who's been working as a PA in, different settings, I found this course difficult, especially the science aspect of it. That being said, I think there is a lot of variation between content in PA courses. And so I know some people that have studied their PA course at a university that's within a medical school, and they've had, very similar teaching to what the medical students had because they've just joined their lectures. And they've also done things like, cadaver dissection as part of their PA course, which I certainly did not do. So, for me personally, I would say it was absolutely not the same. But because there is so much variation in PA content courses, what people have done prior, I don't think I could say that it was, across the board that way. I feel that I have almost been taught in a way to think slightly differently. I think sometimes when we're thinking of questions about what's going on with the patient, we, as a PA, certainly I've kind of, found myself ultimately, we're very good at diagnosing things and we're very good at knowing what first line management is. But I kind of stopped short of asking the question, why did this happen to the patient? What was the underlying process and what caused that? And I think that I wasn't taught to think that way in so much depth as a PA as I'm now being taught to think as, a future doctor.
That's really interesting. The educationalist in me, I find it fascinating to compare that experience of the two and how that changes for you. Can I ask you about any sort of negative reactions you had about changing from being a PA to a doctor, either from PAs or from doctors? Has it been a difficult transition?
It hasn't been a difficult transition. I mean, I don't think anybody's said something to me. They might have said it about me, I don't know. They've not said anything to me about making that transition. Though I did get one comment on Twitter asking if I was going to be happy with the pay cut I'd be taking. And that was from a doctor, junior doctor, who's obviously, understandably unhappy with the pay situation at the moment. But apart from that, no, I haven't actually had any negative comments. From the PA community, I found it to be largely supportive, which I wasn't expecting actually. When I sort of made my Instagram account, I did it because I was struggling with that decision myself, and felt that at that time there was, perhaps a slight taboo of discussing, that I wanted to go into medicine as a PA. I think it feels less present now anyway, but at the time that's how I felt. So I made that account because I wanted there to be a space, so that, if other people were sort of struggling with a decision that was similar, that, they could come and speak to me if they wanted to, or that they could just see the presence of somebody else doing that. And I think that can be quite powerful, just, seeing somebody else doing something. It certainly was for me when, I mentioned earlier that a girl that I studied PA with went on to go and study medicine at Warwick, and that kind of really opened my eyes to that possibility as well. So, and that's why I created the account. But yeah, no, it's been very positive actually. I've had multiple PAs messaging me saying that they've been thinking about the same thing, and for largely similar reasons. Oh, I commonly get asked this, whether there's a shorter route for PAs who want to go into medicine, and the answer is no. It would be great if there was, but then at the same time, like you said, there's not a standardized sort of education for PAs at the moment, apart from the nationals. But in terms of what PAs are taught at university, it can vary. So that's the question I get asked. No, it's mainly entry requirements, whether there's a shorter route for PAs, how to go about getting into medicine, whether the medical degree whether PA has helped me in terms of the medical degree. So I answered earlier on that it was very difficult, but at the same time, yes, in some aspects, PA has helped me, certainly in terms of clinical skills. I've, in my first year of the course, I don't think I even had to pick up the clinical skills handbook, because it was obviously everything being taught from scratch. We do CBL, a case-based learning, which we did PBL as PA, so I was very familiar with the format of that. A lot of the clinical content, many of the core common conditions was obviously already there, having studied the matrix. So second year, I didn't find all that difficult in terms of the clinical content, but there's obviously deficiencies in my knowledge that I've recognized myself. And so whilst we do get taught a lot about things like drugs, for example, like pharmacology, the mechanism of action, I don't think we really do learn that in any kind of depth as PAs at all. So I've had to study hard at that. The anatomy, physiology, I've had to study hard at that. Histology was not something that ever came up in PA. I don't think we ever really got taught histology. So that's something that was fairly new to me. But yeah, largely clinical content. It's been kind of building upon what I already know.
Thank you. I do wonder how many physician associates might make the same transition in the future, and whether the PA profession will be used as a stepping stone into medicine for some people. I don't know.
Yeah, I think individual decisions, and again, I do get people messaging me this as well, actually, would you recommend that I do PA first and then go on to study medicine? And my answer, like almost all of the time, is no, like don't do that, because you're going to be spending more time, more money, what's the point? If you want to go and do medicine and that's what you really want to do, then go and do that. And I think, for me, obviously I decided along the way that I wanted to do medicine, but had I known 100% that's what I wanted to do before, I don't think I would have bothered pursuing sort of the route that I did. And the other thing is, there are quite a few PAs who are at medical school at the moment. We do have a WhatsApp group for PAs who have gone into medicine. So yeah.
Be fascinating to come back and do another episode in a few years once you're qualified and you've been a doctor.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for anybody who's considering going into medicine, and the same is true for PA, that you go in with your eyes open and you know what the job is, and that you have to be really committed to wanting to do the profession. And perhaps with your experience of being a PA and you were seeing the F1s and F2s and what they were going through, you've at least had your eyes open, and you know what you're getting yourself into in making that decision.
Yeah, 100%.
I wonder how you see your role when you become a doctor in terms of working with physician associates and the two professions growing together.
That's really interesting. Obviously, having worked as a PA, and I'm hopefully going to continue my registration as a PA for the foreseeable. I'm obviously going to be a very big advocate for the PA role in my role as a doctor. And I think in terms of opening doors for PAs and creating more of a cohesive working environment, I think there's, understandably a lot of reasons, especially why junior doctors are unhappy with the current situation and sometimes feel like training opportunities are being taken away from them, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that, at the end of the day, we're all one team, and I see the benefits of the continuity that PAs can provide in terms of patient care. So I guess in short, in summary, I'll continue advocating for PAs in the way that I'm able to as a doctor.
Fab. It'd be lovely to have another supportive voice as a doctor for the PA profession. Have the GMC thought through how you're going to be registered? Because you will need a GMC registration number for being a doctor. You'll presumably also have one as a physician associate when GMC regulation comes in for physician associates.
Yes, so this is something that I have briefly had a discussion with the GMC about already. So I'm sort of in talks with them. But the answer so far has been that there is no problem with me maintaining a dual registration. And they just need to sort out the logistics of that. I was told that they've already foresaw that this might be a potential situation that might come up. So they've already sort of had discussions about things like this, and they found it helpful that I had approached them, because they said it will help if they have specific cases that they can sort of look at when they're making decisions about what happens with regards to this.
Ahead of the curve. Well done. Brilliant. Thank you, Donya. I really appreciate you talking to me about this. I found it a fascinating discussion, and I'm sure many other people who've listened will also have been inspired and perhaps have questions. What's the best way for people to find out more about graduate entry medicine, and if they've got any questions?
In terms of finding out more about graduate entry medicine, there's a great booklet online. They can just type in graduate entry medicine UK, and I think it's med schools or something like that. Online, there's a great booklet, and it talks about all of the entry requirements for the various different courses. In terms of if they want to get in touch with me, they can do that via my Instagram account. It's at Future Dr. Mighty. Sometimes, depending on how busy life is, it might take a while for me to respond, but I'm always happy for questions.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. I'll leave links to the graduate entry medicine leaflet and your Instagram account in the show notes so people can find it on their device. Thank you so much for joining me, and good luck in your studies.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to you for listening as well. I do hope you found that an interesting discussion about the conversion from physician associate to doctor. If you've got an idea for a future episode of the PA podcast, I'd love to hear from you. It'd be great to get in touch. Please find me on social media at PA Podcast UK, and I hope you'll join me again for the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Physician Associate Podcast.